around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what heart is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started, it's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what heart is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started. Yeah,
get your boots ready. We're about to go on a trip where we wrestle, nobody settling or calling it quits. You're here for the grit, betcha this stuff is amazing. You're stumbling, welcome to the bump in the apron. Step into it, the hardest part of the ring. Here to bring fun, yeah, in this art he is king. It's the best thing, making sure you don't tap out. Don't go soft with the hardest podcast out. And it's not just another one, it's clear. Off the rest, in this content, none contest. Take the nonsense off the steps. You know it's nothing but pure gems when it's coming off the chest. Get it? Now it's time to sit and relax. Get your mind blown away, ain't no skipping a track. Have you paying more attention, no listening gap. Get everything I ever wanted, no giving it back. Yeah.
What's up, everybody? Hardest part of the ring, back at ya with the apron bump, and diggity dog, we have a special one today. Survivor Series 2001. We made it, folks. We made it. The end of the invasion. Winner take all. I'm gonna kill the Alliance. DDP, who's that? Give him some teeth. But yeah, we are in November of 2001, and this, you're probably sick of me talking about it at this point, but yes, the invasion, which pretty much started in the early summer of 2001, really kicked off at the Invasion pay-per-view, and has progressed on, through SummerSlam, Unforgiven, No Mercy, several months, like what, 6-7 months, and now we're here. Winner take all, as I said. And before I get into the show, I want to give a special shout out to my guest today. He's not just a good guest. He's not a mediocre guest. He's not a subpar guest. He's not an I guest. He is incredible. That's right. Justin Credible is my guest. Yes, that Justin Credible, aka PJ Palaco, aka Aldo Montoya. That Justin Credible is joining me on this episode to discuss WWF Survivor Series 2001. And honestly, I couldn't really think of a much better guest than him, because he's a guy that did not benefit from the invasion. The invasion pretty much killed his WWF career, because we all know what he was capable of. Even in early WWF, his early days, did a lot of good stuff in the mid-90s. And then in ECW, he just exploded. Was one of the biggest stars ECW ever had. Huge name in ECW. Comes over to WWF, gets paired with X-Pac and Albert, which we all know. And I tell him this, one of my favorite factions of all time. I really wish I would have asked him more about X Factor. I really wish I would have gotten him to sing Uncle Cracker or something, but I was just a nervous Nelly, so that didn't happen. But yeah, so Justin came in X Factor, and we all know how that kind of panned out. Or do we, though? Because everybody thinks of X Factor as like, oh, that faction with the silly entrance music, and it didn't really last that long. But do you know why it didn't last that long? Because this fucking invasion storyline threw a monkey wrench into everything. Because like I just mentioned, Justin was a huge name in ECW, so obviously he's going to be positioned in the Alliance, whereas X-Pac and Albert were positioned on Team WWF. So that really split them up. And we talk about it in the episode, but I guess that occurred on Heat at some point, which I personally have never even witnessed. And I'm sure a lot of fans never witnessed either. But that they did have a breakup, a very lukewarm breakup on Heat, when it really should have been something featured more, in my opinion. But yeah, he just became like another body in the invasion on the Alliance side, wasn't really given much of an opportunity. And like I said, I don't want to step on our toes for what we talk about, but he goes into in this episode a lot of why he wasn't able to really gain any traction in WWF. But really excited for you guys to hear all of that, because honestly, I mean, you've heard what I've had to say about the Invasion and about this era in WWF in general. You've heard what my guests have had to say, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of good guests on these episodes that have had different opinions, different kind of points of view on things. And I think if we all, you take all those pay-per-views I listed before and all the reviews I've done, we have a pretty good list of why the Invasion didn't work, right? It was rushed. The incoming stars from WCW and ECW, they weren't built, right? They were just numbers. And Just Incredible was a casualty of that. The whole Invasion really just was. It felt like an ego boost for the McMahons, if nothing else. Don't believe me? Just look at their involvement in this. Just nonsensically, the heads of WCW and ECW, Shane and Stephanie, that made no sense. And then you have, Linda and Vince. I mean, Vince obviously should be a part of it because he's the head of WWF. But it became a McMahon versus McMahon thing, not a company versus company thing. And that's something we've discussed about in previous episodes. The whole premise of what this could have been, the whole romantic kind of view of it, that the whole what would have made this cool is you have 2 or even 3 companies that all have different visions of what wrestling is, 3 different identities, 3 different personalities, and that could have been translated on screen, but it wasn't. You combined ECW and WCW to create this one homogeneous kind of group that had no personality to it, and it was just headed by Stone Cold, Shane McMahon, and Stephanie. It just became WWF Faction A versus WWF Faction B. It was soulless. It had no soul to it. That's what soulless means. But it had no... There was no identity to each faction. Even in the build-up to this... Oh my god, dude. The build-up. It was a mess. First of all, there's so many titles. I'm trying not to ramble on, but there's just so much. Just trying to set the stage here for what all these pay-per-views, all this time that this storyline has gone on. There's so many titles. I mean, in the last few months, it was just like Raw and SmackDown were just non-stop title matches. Going to any Raw, any SmackDown during this period, it opens with a US title, and then there's a WCW tag title match. Then there's a hardcore title match. Then there's a WWF tag team. Like, it's just nonsense. There's over... How many titles are there? Probably like 12, I think. Because you got WWF. You got the WWF title. WCW. US title. Intercontinental title. WCW tag. WWF tag. Cruiserweight. Light heavyweight. Hardcore. European. And that's not even factoring in the women's title, which comes back on this show, by the way. So unless I'm missing any, that's 11 titles. You know what I mean? And none of them mean a goddamn thing. But thankfully, we see some consolidation on this show, Survivor Series. We see some unification matches. But yeah, I mean, at this point, honestly, the show, I for whatever it is, I did enjoy watching Survivor Series 2001. Specifically, the main event, I thought was great. Now, we all can agree that the players should have been different. We all agree that the build-up should have been different. But as far as the players they had involved in it, I don't think it could have been better. You have a really good match between Edge and Test. You have a great steel cage match between the Hardys and the Dudleys. There's some good stuff on this show, but you also see a lot of the bad. And a lot of that bad is displayed in the match that my guest is involved in, which, by the way, he didn't even remember that he was involved in this show, if that tells you anything about how this was built up. But yeah, there's good, there's bad, but I was excited to talk to, I'm gonna call him Just Incredible because I'm a fucking mark. I was excited to talk to Justin about the woes that he had, both in this storyline specifically and otherwise. But yeah, like I said, you've heard what I've had to say, you've heard what my guests have had to say, you've heard what fans have had to say about this. But now it's time to get someone's first-hand perspective on what went down during the invasion, during Survivor Series in general. And yeah, man, let's just get right to it, man. Yeah, check out Justin on Twitter at PJ Polacco. I'll put that in the description as well. A really, really fun follow on Twitter, actually. I highly recommend him. And I greatly appreciate him taking the time to not only be on this podcast, but to watch the show that he hadn't watched in a while. So really awesome dude, really fun to talk to. Let's just get right into it, man. Survivor Series 2001 with myself and Justin Credible. With it. Well, yeah, first of all, man, thank you for doing this with me. Thank you for taking the time to join me on here. I know you offer a lot of insight on the subject that we'll be talking about today.
Nice.
But yeah, I've heard you on a bunch of interviews and stuff, and heard so much about your career, and I've watched a lot of it as well. But I really kind of wanted to like zone in on like your initial WWF run, at least in your 2001 run, I guess. Because the majority of that run kind of revolves around the invasion, right?
Right.
I guess just to see if we're on the same page here. What are your general opinions on the invasion storyline?
I really was. I didn't think it was executed very well at all. That's just me personally, because it affected me. It affected my whole run, quite frankly, with the company. Because before the buyout of WCW, I came in to team with X-Pac, and we formed a team called X Factor, and we feuded with the Dudleys, which was great. And anyways, and then we did some stuff with the Hardys and whatever, and we were supposed to eventually go on and get a tag team title run. So when news that they were going to do the invasion, it just turned every storyline that they were going to do really upside down. And and as we come to find out, I knew it was going to be very hard for me, in all of that mess to get over. I mean, I ended up being a background act for the invasion, for the alliance, which was, a lot of good guys ended up in that situation, but it was a no-win streak for a lot of us at the time,
Right. Yeah, and I'm so glad you bring up X Factor, because that's like one of my guilty pleasures is the wrong word, but it's like such a team that had so much potential, but you just weren't given the chance at all. Because like you said, you came in at a time right when the invasion was starting, and that's when you guys were paired up, and you had that feud with the Dudleys, which is a great feud. But then the invasion happened, then the battle lines were drawn, and you were just put on that side with ECW, as you should have been, and it all made sense. But I kind of think there could have at least been like an angle of some sort to break you guys up, because to my knowledge, it wasn't brought up on TV unless it was like on Heat or something.
It did. Well, yeah, it was on Heat.
Okay.
It was something. It was like a full episode of Heat where I was in WWF New York at the time, and some kind of. It was corny though. It was really corny and very underwhelming. With the alliance, man, what they had done with the night they formed it, at first ECW kind of formed mid show. I think it was, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was like me and Raven and the Dudleys in the ring. And and a bunch of other ECW guys came in, and it looked like we were going to attack the Dudleys, and we all ended up kind of pairing up and becoming, Heyman was out there, and it became like you could tell the ECW guys had formed a faction. And by the end of the show, literally an hour later, the alliance was formed. And it was so obvious, because I think we were in Atlanta at the Georgia Dome when ECW had formed. The crowd popped. It was a really nice response. And then at the end, when the alliance formed, and Stephanie and that whole thing, it just like it really deflated the entire room. And and with Steve it just could have been done. I think it would have been much more successful if they tried to play it closer to the truth of three promotions vying for like WWF, ECW, and WCW. And the alliance was just a way, I guess, to make it easier maybe. But it was obviously in my opinion, I could be wrong, but it was a cheaper way to book it, and it just, like I said, it just put a bunch of us in a corner of Steve Austin, which really was, you know, useless at the time for me. You know, we were just background fodder. You know.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about Steve Austin a little later in the show too. But yeah, I agree with you. If it would have been presented more as like ECW as its own thing, and then you have WCW and WWF, because they had the talent there. They had
Sure.
you, the Dudleys, Raven. A lot of these guys are like background guys, but
Yep.
had such a great run in ECW. But once they were just under the WWF umbrella, they just felt like you said, background. And it's a shame because I think that was like the biggest thing of the invasion is they had no interest in building up those new people that came in, right? The outsiders.
Yep.
Because guys like yourself, guys like Sean O'Hare, Chuck Palumbo, these like really talented guys that have the look, they have everything. But for whatever reason, like you yourself were a great talker in ECW, but I felt like you never got promo time.
Nope.
Just a handful of times, you know?
Yeah.
And they like, it's like, I think I heard you in another interview. They like pretty much took everything from you that made you who you were. The jean shorts, because Stone Cold was wearing it. You couldn't do the tombstone, the super kick.
Right. Yep.
Didn't let you talk. It's like you had no chance, man.
No, I mean, I did the best I could. I really did. I mean, you know, and there were a lot of other guys there that suffered the same thing, like Raven. And Dreamer was there, and Dreamer, you know how that went for him. I mean, you know, it didn't go very well.
Dreamer, so because he was like the face of ECW, and I felt like he was never even like on screen really during the invasion.
Right. Yeah. And it was just a way to kind of, and ECW just went out of business too, only like 3 or 4 months before. So it's not like it was that far off, you know. So really it just showed that they had no care about really crafting these storylines. You know, it was just, we're gonna push ahead with the WWE agenda, but it should have been the WWE agenda. Like, they try so hard to spin their own storylines, when in essence, reality is, if you would have just tried to stick to what pro wrestling fans already know, and kind of, you know, use their past, their background, to sort of help build your, you know what I mean? It doesn't take that much. They just have such an ego that they're just not interested in it, you know, and they do what they do, I guess, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see that in the main event too. It's just hilarious that that's like what their vision was of this, because ultimately it just became just like one faction versus one faction. It wasn't a company thing. There was no identity to any of the sides.
Yep.
They just lost everything. But, yeah, so Survivor Series 2001, that is the culmination of all of this. Several months, pretty much the majority of 2001 was dedicated to this invasion storyline. A lot of unification matches on this show. Battle Royal, which yourself partook in. And then the main event, which obviously is the 5-on-5 elimination match. Have you watched this show anytime recently, or have you ever gone back and watched this show?
I watched it when I knew I went through it when I knew I had to do this with you.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
And I had forgotten about all of it, quite frankly.
Really?
Yeah.
It was. I mean, I guess it's almost 20 years ago, almost, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't blame you at all. But yeah, I watched the show back a few days ago as well. And like you, I don't really remember much about it outside of the main event. But overall, the show, I mean, we talked the storyline and all the problems it had, but the show as a whole, I kind of enjoyed. It didn't seem like it dragged at all, especially the main event. I thought the main event was great. If you look past who's in it, I think with what they had, I think the show overall was pretty solid. What about you, just in general?
It was good. It was solid, you know. Definitely it has its, like anything they do, I think they always focus, and as well they should probably, in the main storylines, you know. But their biggest problem, you know, especially, you know, today, is like they really don't try hard enough to you know, with all the time that they have, to kind of bring up other talents, you know. In my opinion, what made, like, what did they call it? The Attitude Era? What made the Attitude Era so successful? And I know a lot of people are not going to like to hear this, but I think it had a lot of truth to it. Vince Russo really believed in, you know, because he was very successful at that point with the WWE, you know, and he had everybody, even like Taka Michinoku and the smaller, you know, people that weren't, you know, in a little bit of in storylines, you know, everybody was kind of involved, where or come 2001 and forward, it's like only a handful of people will get promos and mic time. So it's almost doesn't seem as important to me. And, it's like, it drags the time of the watching it. You're like, all right, let's get to the main stuff, because the rest doesn't really matter,
Yeah. Well, I think like around WrestleMania time of 2001, I think during that era, it was pretty solid from a top to bottom kind of standpoint, as far as everyone having their kind of thing. But once the invasion started, it was like, okay, we have the invasion, and then we'll kind of just figure it out. We have the main event, and then we'll kind of fill in the holes below that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the show opens up. They're in Greensboro, North Carolina. Really good video package, kind of hyping up the severity with like the end is near music. You have JR, Paul Heyman on commentary. I know you were pretty much in ring or on the show during most of their run as a commentary duo, but as far as their commentary, what did you think about it?
I thought they were great. I really enjoyed, Heyman's really good at anything he kind of does that has to do with talking. He's very good at explaining situations, and he's great at delivering those messages. And Jim Ross is, probably one of the best ever to do it. So they paint a clear picture, and they're still, even though they're taking direction from Vince McMahon, they're still very good at, they know the history of the guys. They know things that a lot of the viewers may not know, and they're not afraid to pick up on that. So I always enjoyed their work, especially as a team,
Absolutely. Yeah, especially as a team, because they were like the perfect kind of combination, the perfect narration for the whole invasion, because you have JR one side, Heyman one side, and they're so good at just bickering with each other. And it really kind of amplified the stakes of this show, and by amplifying the hostility between them. Just
absolutely.
Table.
Yep.
And then, so with this first match, the European Championship is on the line. Christian versus Al Snow. So this match pretty much just arose a few hours before the show on Heat. Not a ton of story there at all, so it's pretty random. But the match itself, I love both these guys. I think both are very underrated. For the time they were given, I think they made every second count. Christian had a ton of heat in the beginning, saying everybody here in South Carolina, North Carolina, crowd was hot for it. But ultimately, after Al Snow can't put Christian away with the snowplow, Christian runs away, runs outside the ring, gets back in, catches Al Snow with an unprettier for the win. So he retains his coveted European Championship. So you really, it's a pretty solid match to throw out there as an opener. And I enjoyed it for what it was. How about you?
I enjoyed it too. I actually was one of the people that I didn't mind the European title all that much. But it just kind of showed at the time they didn't even know really what to do with a talent like Christian,
Yeah.
But because there were so many people there. But nonetheless, it was a good match. I did enjoy it. It was a good opening match. And Al Snow is always really good. So I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you think about Christian in AEW? Kind of just bringing it to current day for a second.
I like it.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't like, and it's not AEW's fault. Maybe it is a little bit, but people were so hyped. Then it started the rumors start getting out there, or people are hoping it may be CM Punk, it may be Kurt Angle. So when it was Christian, even though he's amazing and he is a Hall of Fame type talent, and probably will be one day in the Hall of Fame, it was a bit of a disappointment. But that being said, I think it was a great addition. The only thing that is starting to concern me is not really concerning me, but their top tier guys are all over 40, really. A lot of them, Christian's my age. I'm 47. So, and that's not a huge problem, but it could start to become a problem when, it just shows to me like this was 20, you mentioned 20 years since, it's almost 20 years from this point in Survivor Series. And we're still not getting guys over enough in this, like the past generations to kind of, it's like we lost a generation of guys. Like we're, you know what I mean? It's like we're always going back to that era for guys like, the Paul Whites and the Edges and the Christians. And Matt Hardy, and so many other people. It's like, what happened to guys that were around in 2005, 6, 7, 8? Like they're not around any, or
Right.
weren't over enough probably, or perhaps to even, I don't know. It's like there's a lost generation there for some reason. But I think he'll be just fine for AEW. I really do. He still has it. You know, he could still go. You know,
Absolutely.
So that's all that really should matter.
Right, and I think he'll be, if nothing else, a great mind to have backstage for
Absolutely.
these young guys, because I think a lot of them could use some of that psychology that Christian was such known for.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
But yeah, at this point, Christian was in a weird spot in 2001. He's fresh off of that feud with Edge, so their breakup of their tag team. It was kind of a rushed feud. They had good matches for what they had. But coming out of that feud with Edge was the star, and Christian, it was we'll figure out what we do with Christian.
To do later, yeah.
But yeah, he came out on the other side, I think, eventually. So after that match, we have a backstage segment with Steve Austin and Deborah walking backstage into the locker room with the Alliance, and this is like kind of like a spotlight of like the woes of the storyline, because you have the Alliance team. So you have Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Booker T, RVD, Shane McMahon. You also have Stephanie in there. And I know it was like a small detail, but I noticed that RVD and Booker T were like out of frame during this. You might not even notice that, but it was such like a we're focusing on the WWF guys that are allegedly supposed to be in this alliance, and not these homegrown guys that you can like cultivate.
Yeah.
And like in the build up to this, I don't know if you remember, but there was a lot of infighting between both sides.
Yes.
And we'll see that'll come into play later, which I did like. But I think it might have been a better story if you had a really strong unified alliance versus a fractured WWF. Do you agree?
I think so. You know, you made a great point there. I didn't even see it like that. Yeah, but you know, not focusing in on Booker and RVD is definitely signs of what's to come. You know, and I get it. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, probably one of the greatest superstars of all time. But it almost seemed, you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know. You really could tell where their heads were, you know, at that time. That was a great point you just made. I didn't even see that like that.
Thank you. I do it every once in a while. Well, what did you think of Stone Cold and his heel run in 2001?
It was okay. It was okay. I knew Steve, and I still know Steve very well. I've done a couple of his podcasts and gotten to talk to him since. And he was really, he was really burnt out here.
Right.
I mean, he's coming off of probably one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time, if I'm not mistaken. It was the only one I was in, WrestleMania 17, where Pac and I opened up, you know, the show. It was like we were the dark match on Heat or something, but still, I got to wrestle.
Yeah, counts.
Yeah, and I know Steve was kind of just hurting for some time off. And when you're at that level, and especially with this storyline, I could just see the cracks.
Yeah.
In him personally, you know what I mean? There was a lot of stuff going on that I can't even get into here. That was just, you know, he was tired. He was physically, like, you know what I mean? He needed a break.
Yeah.
And I think his heel run could have been much. I mean, not that it was bad by any means, but it was a lot of ha-ha.
Yeah.
And I think if Steve was a little more, you know, fresh and had some time to kind of recuperate, I think he would have, you know, maybe played it to the WWE, maybe some different ideas or whatnot, you know. But it was okay for what it was.
Yeah.
You know, definitely okay for what it was.
I agree. Yeah. Especially, you know, at the beginning with his team with Triple H, I thought a lot of that stuff was really great. But then you have Triple H go out with injury, and I think that threw a monkey wrench into their plans. And like you said, it became a lot of comedy stuff, which admittedly, I mean, I loved. Like Steve's comedic timing is underrated, I think, especially stuff he did with Kurt. And also a lot of stuff he did with the people having this next match, William Regal versus Tajiri. Another kind of like a throwaway, not a throwaway match, because these guys have been pretty much associated for a couple months at this point. But Tajiri came in as Regal's assistant when Regal was commissioner. But Regal turned and joined the Alliance for whatever reason. I know he was in WCW, but I feel like it was the way they did it. It kind of didn't really make sense. But versus Tajiri, who was a guy who probably should have been on the Alliance, but I guess he was super hot when he came in. Like he was automatically super over with the crowd. Everybody loved. Did you work with Tajiri in ECW?
Oh yeah,
A lot, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about Tajiri? I think he's another one of those guys that's like criminally underrated.
Oh yeah, I think he was great. I worked with him a couple times, but one time we had a singles match, and for that I think I was heavyweight champion at the time, and he challenged me somewhere, and I think it was on TNN if I'm not mistaken, and we had a hell of a match. It was really, really criminally underrated.
Yeah, absolutely,
Big time.
I agree.
Yeah.
But this match here lasts maybe 2 minutes. Regal somehow manages to bust himself open in those 2 minutes. That's just Regal though, I guess. There's one spot where Regal throws Tajiri over the top ropes, but he gets caught like Mick Foley did when he lost his ear.
Yeah.
In between the top and middle rope. But Regal, being the pro, he improvises and kind of grabs Tajiri's ankles and like chokes him on it, which looks brutal, but I love that improvisation on Regal's part. But then kind of just hits a tiger power bomb on Tajiri out of nowhere to get the win here. And then after the match, Tori Wilson, who is Tajiri's girlfriend at the time, comes out to check on Tajiri. But of course, Regal, what else is he going to do? Gets back in the ring and power bombs Tori Wilson, and then walks away with a bloody nose. Good shit, right?
Yeah.
What a time, different time, right?
Yeah, it was okay. It was too short. Nothing. It didn't really matter. I think it's one of those things that they do for some reason. But boy, you couldn't get away with power bombing Tori Wilson today. I don't think.
Well, that being said, they did just announce Randy Orton versus Alexa Bliss at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah, but they're not going to touch. You know what I mean?
Hey, you never know. Could see some power bombs, pile driver maybe.
I don't know if
wrap a steel chair around Alexa's head.
She's 100 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If Randy, you know what I mean? It just I hate when they do those kinds of things because if they won't put the match out there like that. It'll be some gimmick. But I just hate it because a guy like Randy would kick my ass.
Right.
And I'm a 250-pound guy. So to wrestle and and to sell, especially for a girl of that size, it's criminal, and it really puts a hole, at least for me, for my liking of wrestling, kind of kills it for me. But that's
right. I'm sure it'll be a lot of magic involved, a lot of spooky,
absolutely
sorcery.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's your thing, right?
Yeah, not really, but yeah.
Oh man, but this next match here, so we have a unification match. It's the U.S. title or the U.S. champion versus the Intercontinental champion. Edge versus Test. So I like that they're finally consolidating these titles. Because I've been watching all like the Raws and pay-per-views and all this stuff building up, and they just have like fucking 12 titles because you mentioned the European title, and nobody cared about that because there was so many other titles, and it was everything was just diluted and nothing really mattered. So it's good that they're finally consolidating that. But this was a really good match. I didn't really know what to expect between Edge and Test, but these guys seem to have really good chemistry. A lot of great false finishes. Edge ends up winning this by countering a full Nelson slam into a roll up, and becomes the unified U.S. and Intercontinental champion. Really great match as far as I saw.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I was really surprised because I wrestled Test before, and he's not the easiest guy to wrestle. He was a really nice dude. God rest his soul. But Andrew was stiff and he didn't move around all that well. So Edge really, it was just like he was really excitable because he really didn't have that much experience, believe it or not. He only had like a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, which isn't that much to be in there, believe it or not. He's still considered sort of green, but Edge took it out. He got a good match out of him is what I'm trying to say. So yeah. And I like the finish too.
Yeah, hard to have a bad match with Edge, especially at this point.
Definitely. Yeah.
Do you think that's why Test never really? Because this is kind of like his peak, really, as far as his WWF career. Do you think that's kind of what kind of like kept him from reaching a higher level?
I think it was a bunch of things. His substance issues were not that pretty bad. Right. But he had that look, man. I think they could have worked around his stuff. I think they would have. I just don't know if he gave the office that confidence because it was like back then it was still guys were into what they were into, and as long as you were pissing clean or had a prescription for it, they couldn't say anything to you. So, but that wouldn't fly today in the WWE.
Right.
But yeah.
Do you think there's any like tie-in because Triple H is out with an injury at this point, and once he comes back, that's kind of when Test kind of again they kind of have similar looks, similar. I guess
Yeah.
Test is taller. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of like they, well, we have Triple H, so why do we need Test kind of thing?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that certainly could be it. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were high on him for a long time, but
Right.
I think, like I said, I think he was too much of a gamble to really rely on,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. But speaking of gambling, we got a lot of gambling in this next match. It's another unification match for the tag team titles. So it's a WCW and WWF tag team titles. So we have the Hardys versus the Dudleys. Hard to go wrong with this. These two teams.
Yeah.
And as far as like representing each company for the champions, I think this is pretty much as good as they could have gotten.
Yeah.
The Hardys being pretty much, as far as in the tag team division, the face of that in the WWF. And WCW, I mean, in the later years, weren't really known for their tag teams. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And but the Dudleys are such a very prominent name in wrestling. So I think they were a good fixture to kind of have represent those champions. And it's a steel cage match. So we've seen these guys in TLC matches, all that shit. But now we have a steel cage match. And I mean, obviously, it's a great match. I mean, how could it not be? You got Bubba bombs off the top rope. You have each team making really good use of the cage, double team maneuvers, all that stuff. But ultimately, so Stacy Keibler is with the Dudleys, the Duchess of Dudleyville. And eventually so actually, I should note that I do like the rules, how they were laid out, that if you wanted to escape, you had to go over the top. So you couldn't just, I don't know about you, but that drives me insane that you can just walk through the door.
Yeah, I hated that.
Yeah.
Could not stand that.
No, it's like, why would you ever try to pin somebody if you can just walk on out?
Yep.
But they made it specifically you had to climb over the top, which makes a little bit more sense.
Right.
But Stacy, who was on the outside, lures Nick Patrick, the referee, in with her sexuality and all that. Steals the key from him and unlocks the door to slide in a table, because Dudley's, you can't have a Dudley match without a table. They set the table up in the middle of the ring, and at some point they try to do a 3D on the Jeff Hardy through the table. I think Jeff through the table, but they counter it, and Matt is able to escape the cage, so leaving it as basically a handicap match with the Dudleys versus Jeff. Jeff is about to escape, but he sees Devon laying on the table and can't help himself, and does a swanton bomb off the cage and just obliterates the table. Devon moves out of the way, but the table just explodes. Crazy bump. So that is obviously the end of Jeff. Bubba's the one, I believe, that covers them. They win the match. Matt can't do anything because he's on the outside. I like the storytelling here because I believe this is pretty much the beginning of the end for the Hardys. So that kind of plays into, Matt, he's done teaming with Jeff because he's taking all these unnecessary risks and all that stuff. So from a psychology standpoint, I really like the match and crazy bump at the end. Yeah, I pretty much enjoyed all of it. What about you?
Yeah, me too. I thought it was almost really refreshing to see, because we don't see matches like that anymore that are so well worked. You know what I mean? They really knew how to tell stories, and it's almost like the further into the future, like we haven't really gone, like we haven't progressed. Like, you know what I mean? Because I really don't see good stuff like, and maybe I'm being a little biased because those are my friends. All of them are my friends. But they told a great story. Even the WWE, with the way they were trying to break up the Hardys and having Jeff. I remember that actually from when I rewatched it. I remember them doing that actually live, and it was just well done. They were already planting seeds, and it was just a good piece of business right there. Real good piece of business.
Absolutely.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
The tag division for me personally, growing up, that was like because I was a huge Hardy Boys mark. Hated Edge and Christian, loved the Dudleys, all that stuff. But it seemed like it kind of fell off a cliff after WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Because they had that TLC match, which is one of the best of all time. Then after that, I mean, with the invasion happening and all that, like that's just more justification for X Factor being more prominent because you guys were a great
Right.
team, and you could have added to that, be a new fresh team in there. But it's weird, yeah. Did you get any sense of that, like tag team wrestling becoming less of a priority as the years went on?
I did start to see that, yeah. And then I got a taste of it. We actually did, and I was really hoping that they would continue this. I remember right around the time of the plane ride from hell. I think it was we were at Insurrection in London, and we had a 14 match. It was the X Factor against the Dudleys, against the Hardys, against Edge and Christian. And that was a hell of a match.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like a really, really good match. And we did another one with the, I think it was Benoit and Jericho against me and Pac as well.
Right.
We had some great matches with them because for some reason they were teaming. I think it was like they called them the Chris's.
They're Canadian, they're Chris's, you know.
Yeah. And I just thought we would have fit in fine, but they started to really kind of take the I don't know, the seriousness of the tag team division, which was so hot at one point, like you said, and they could have continued it. And I just think they chose not to. It was just a simple, we're going in a different direction than highlighting the tag team division. You know, It's a shame.
Yeah, agreed. And we get a little taste of that too in this next match, the Immunity Battle Royal. It's good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because beforehand, Scotty 2 Hotty is backstage. He's amped up. He's ready to warm out there and get in this battle royal. But runs into Test, who is not happy, none too pleased with the match earlier. So he just beats up Scotty and takes a spot. It's good, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you have two teams in the Super Bowl, the other team could just beat up the other team and just kind of slot
and
it.
There you go, take this. Yeah. I hate that stuff. It's so cheesy, but
it is.
You know, what are you gonna do?
A dastardly heel.
And there was a ton of guys. I was looking through the Wikipedia page to see who was in that. I forgot I was in that. I didn't watch the Battle Royal back. Yeah, I can't watch Battle Royals because they're just usually, especially if they're not Royal Rumbles, they're just going to be cheesy and they just want to get one guy. They're worried about getting one guy over. So it's just like punch kick until somebody goes over the top and we got the guy we want to go over, so it was just like, so yeah, I didn't see that gem of a battle royal.
Right. Yeah. Cause I was going to ask like, how are they to work? Because like you said, it just seems like a bunch of just kind of lollygagging around until it's your time to get eliminated.
Yep, you basically are looking around waiting for because on the sheet of paper you have your cue is okay, they're going to eliminate Lance Storm, so 30 seconds after Lance gets eliminated, I'm just throwing a name out there because I know he was in it too, I'll get eliminated. So you just spend time hiding somewhere, trying not to do much, and then you wait for your time and you get thrown out.
Yeah, I was like, because I don't remember this match at all. Really, I don't remember who won or anything. So I was pulling for you, man. I really was. But
I always tell people I didn't do a Survivor Series, so I lied twice because I guess I was in the '96 Survivor Series and the 2001 Survivor Series.
Who'd you
forgot all about that.
What'd you do in '96?
We were a dark match with me, Billy Gunn, all those weird B-level guys against who was it? The Sultan. And Pierre when he was doing the pirate, all those weird gimmicks against all those weird gimmicks. The guys that aren't good enough to be on the main show, not that we're not good enough. I mean, those are all future Hall of Fame guys, but the guys that they weren't using really, they were going to just throw in that. It was such a discombobbled match as well.
That was your Aldo Montoya days, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it was a good time, right? You really enjoyed it?
Yeah, it actually was a really good time. Believe it or not. Yeah. Yeah, I loved it. I got to travel the world, man, and I learned so much. That really allowed me to become who I was as a performer. So, I mean, I got to work with everybody. Right. It was good. I even got to work with, which ended up being a good thing for me, which Austin really liked, was working with me because we'd have really good matches before he was Stone Cold. Actually, when he was the ringmaster, and he had Ted DiBiase with him, me and Steve would tear it up. Got to work quite a bit. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a little bit before my time, but I'll definitely have to go back and check that stuff out. But yeah, this battle royal, man. First of all, I love though. So the Alliance makes their entrance, and who's out there front and center? It's this guy right here.
Yeah.
Really making every second count. Love that. But yeah, the match, like you said, is just kind of a clusterfuck a little bit. Chavo and Hugh Morris get in there late because they're kind of like free agents at this point. So it's Taz, same thing. So they're trying to like have some story elements to it, but I think the crowd's getting their popcorn.
Point, right. Yeah, that's exactly what that is. Yeah.
Comes down to Billy Gunn and Test, who is back here, and gives Billy Gunn the big boot and eliminates him. So Test gets immunity. So if the Alliance loses and they go out of business, he will still have a job. This is like Billy and Chuck, like their tag team. This is like right before that starts.
Yeah.
For Billy Gunn. Another guy, it's like, have you worked with Billy Gunn a good amount?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How was he? Because he's another guy. I'm surprised I didn't really.
So good, criminally too good actually, because he's still in such great physical shape, super fast. Mm-hmm. And I can't understand how somebody goes from being in DX to then all of a sudden, like, you know what I mean? It's like I just can't understand when you have that kind of momentum to then going to nothing, you know, or not nothing, but not what it was.
I mean, not a lot, yeah,
not what it could have been, you know.
Yeah, exactly, because he was the one Billy Gunn, which is like a gimmick a lot of people might even remember, because it was so like he was so undercard at the time, which is bizarre because once again another guy that had that look. He had the athleticism. I mean, like you say, he's still going today. I think he just won a bodybuilding competition a few months ago.
Oh, he's ridiculous. He's ridiculously like a freak. He's got to be 50 something.
Yeah,
right now. Yeah.
As good a shape as he's in better shape than me. That's for sure.
They must have that good shit down in Florida.
Well, there's no rules down there, you know. So it's, you know, don't talk, don't ask, you know.
Yeah.
But so after that, we have a women's match. So the women's title at this point is vacated. Chyna won it back in like May, I want to say, at Judgment Day. But she shortly left. And the women's title just wasn't a fixture on TV. You know, 2001 women's wrestling wasn't really a thing. And so it was kind of just a background thing. But they're finally bringing the title back, vacated, and we have 6 ladies in a match to see who will be that champion. So we have Molly Holly versus Ivory versus Lita versus Trish Stratus versus the debuting Jazz from ECW. Yeah. I didn't remember her debuting this early in her run, but it was good to see her.
Neither did I, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was like a 2002, like the drafts and all that stuff had already happened, but
here
she is here. And she makes her mark right away in this match. It cracked me because she went right in there and did this like spear spine buster type of move to Trish Stratus and throwing people around. It was so like she differentiated herself from everybody else because she was like a true wrestler, and you didn't really see that a lot. But this is like this out of place, like really good match from the women, or at least better than you would typically see in this time period. Ultimately, towards the end, Jazz gets low bridged over the ropes on top of Ivory and Jacqueline. Trish is in the ring. She hits the Stratusfaction onto Ivory to win her first women's championship. And we all know how her career turned out. The rocket was on her after this. But yeah, for what it was, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun to kind of see all those gals in the ring together. And you really start to realize how great these girls were. I mean, Molly Holly, she was a friend of mine. I traveled with her once in a while back in the day. And she was so talented, such a talented girl. And Jazz, I knew Jazz, like you said, from ECW. And she's still doing it today. She's a real wrestler. Yeah. You know, so and even Lita, all those gals are awesome. So to see them all in the ring really is like a snapshot of that era, you know, and what was to come, really, you know.
Yeah, definitely a good snapshot of the talent that they had and the potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good to see Molly Holly going in the Hall of Fame as well this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Long deserved.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the main event. Winner take all. So this is pretty much what the whole show is centered around. Pretty much the last hour of the show or so. So it's a 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series match. We have Team Alliance, Stone Cold, Kurt Angle, Shane McMahon, Booker T, and RVD versus Team WWF. We have The Rock, Undertaker, Kane, Big Show, Chris Jericho. So it's like looking at those names is like it feels like there's a lot of like pieces you can like move around that would make more sense.
Yeah, you definitely could, but
throwing Jericho and the Giant on the Alliance, get rid of Shane McMahon. Like there's so much, we talked about. There's so many different like people they could have built up. I think you should have been in this match personally, but that's just me. So the match, so the entrances, there were a few things I noticed in the entrances. One thing I loved was Howard Finkel, who was doing the announcing. When every Alliance member got in the ring, he would like give him the stink eye, like he would look at him like really menacingly.
Right. Yes.
It was like such a small detail, but he's him being the first employee of WWF, it like makes sense that he would have such disdain for the Alliance.
Yeah, he was great like that. Howard was amazing. He loved that stuff, man, so much.
Yeah. Then you have Undertaker coming out trying to run over everybody with his bike, as he should. I mean, like, why wouldn't he? And then you have JR and Heyman bickering with each other. There's a lot of good, pieces that are building up this match, making it feel like a big deal because, for all intents and purposes, it is, and it should be. And to amplify that, you have Rock and Austin started out, which is like, can't get any better at that, especially at this point.
Exactly. Yep.
And maybe the MVP of this match might be Shane McMahon. Because I love him. He's breaking up every single pin, whether it's just like an arm drag, a little clothesline here and there. He's just sprinting in that ring, diving like his life depends on it. Like it gave like a sense of urgency, I think. And I think that's like a detail that I think Shane is great with that stuff.
I think he's great too. He's criminally left out of a lot of things that you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what his deal is. He was always the coolest of the McMahons. And I don't know what his deal is, but Shane is, when he wants to be great, he could be great,
Yeah. No, I mean, he has
not to mention he's really good at what he does. Like, he's very athletic. Like, he should be that athletic because he doesn't look all that. Like, there's a lot of flab going on underneath there, But he's got some.
It's a jersey.
We
don't talk about
ability. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of bad Shane McMahon matches. He always delivers.
Yep.
So at some point, Big Show gets in. He's destroying everybody. But ultimately, he gets hit with an angle slam, followed by a scissors kick by Booker T, followed by a 5-star frog splash from RVD, and then followed by an elbow drop from Shane McMahon. So he gets hit with everybody's finisher. He gets eliminated, but I think he looks really strong in defeat, having to take everybody's finisher.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good.
Yeah.
But then, so after that, Shane is celebrating. He's all amped up because he eliminated the Big Show on his own, of course. And he turns around to face The Rock. The Rock just beats the shit out of him. Tags in Kane, who gives him a choke slam. Who tags in Undertaker, who gives him a tombstone and eliminates Shane. So kind of like a karma thing. Now all the finishers get on Shane.
Right.
Then Chris Jericho gets in there. And Chris Jericho is the one that eliminates Shane. Which is crazy because Jericho and Shane, two guys that are still wrestling today.
Right. Yep.
RVD and Kane get in there. RVD hits the 5-star frog splash on Kane, and everything breaks down. Everybody's fighting on the outside. But then on the inside of the ring, Kane gets back up, and RVD hits him with a top rope kick, eliminating Kane, which felt like a big deal to me for RVD to eliminate someone as huge as Kane.
Yeah, big time.
And RVD, he was super over at this time. And it's one of my favorite things because he was so clearly wasn't designed for that. He felt like just another number in the beginning. But people got behind him just organically with the great matches he was having with Jeff Hardy and Jericho and stuff.
His ability definitely got him over,
Yeah, who would have thought, right?
Well, I mean, because he was always, I just got to say this real quick. He had a couple of, he did things like the 5-star frog splash and just did some jazzy offense. Whereas as a heel, I was like a bump taker, a flair kind of a thing. My offense wasn't supposed to be so jazzy. It was all in the booking that I would get people. So if you don't have a lot of that as your character base, you're not going to get over with the WWE fan base, because if you're waiting for the WWE to get you over, you could be waiting for a long time. And so he had the right move set, the right kind of attitude and thing for that time, because nobody's seen anything like him at that point yet,
Right. Yeah, because like the martial arts aspect wasn't as prominent as it is today, where now it seems like everybody does it.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, RVD eliminates Kane. Taker gets in there, hits the last ride on Kurt Angle. Booker T gets in there, tries to hit Undertaker with a chair, but Undertaker ducks out of the way, kicks him out, but runs into a Stone Cold Stunner. Austin pulls Kurt on top of Taker, and Taker is eliminated. I feel like Undertaker, he almost felt background in the whole invasion, which to me, it feels like he should have been the face of the WWF.
Yeah.
So now on the WWF side, just to recap, so now the only two men left are Rock and Jericho, who had been feuding for a couple months before this, which is like a thing that I don't really remember happening until I just recently watched.
I remember, the only reason I remember that is because me and Raven wrestled Rock and Jericho, and Jericho actually hit Rock with a chair, and we put the boots to Rock, and somehow Raven and I won by DQ.
Oh yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah, that on your resume, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but it was something that wasn't a big deal. It was there obviously for their feud, but the only reason I remember is because I was in it and I remember them feuding. So yeah, little tidbit there. Right. I got in the ring with The Rock.
Are you bragging or some shit? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So we have Rock. Rock's in there. He's able to catch Booker T with a roll up out of nowhere to eliminate him. Booker T, another guy who just felt background when he shouldn't have been. Like, again, he could have been like, because he was one of the biggest names in WCW when it folded. So RVD and Jericho are in there now. They're both legal, and they have a good little segment there for a few minutes. RVD goes for a split-legged moonsault, but Jericho gets the knees up and then follows it up with the breakdown, which is kind of like Miz's finish, the skull crushing finale.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Jericho eliminates RVD. So now we got a 2-on-2 match. And both those duos, like we just mentioned, Rock and Jericho, who have been at each other's throats. And now we have Kurt and Austin, who also have been feuding for a few months. And you have the whole Kurt turning on the WWF story. But, well, that'll all kind of like play itself out in this match as well. So Kurt Angle gets put in the sharpshooter by The Rock and taps out almost immediately. And I'm watching this and I'm like, that's kind of weird, Kurt Angle to tap out so quickly. But when you kind of see how this all pans out, it almost makes sense. Austin, I think how does he beat you? I think Austin just rolls up Jericho to eliminate him. So now we just got a one-on-one match. Stone Cold versus The Rock, which maybe it just should have been that. Jericho gets back in after he's eliminated. He's all pissed off and turns on The Rock, hits The Rock with a steel chair. He's all emotional that he lost, forgot what the stakes are. So he just takes out The Rock. But Austin isn't able to capitalize on this, or he tries to at least. He dominates him for a while, beats him up on the outside, hits The Rock with a rock bottom for a 2 count. Ref bumps all over the place. Austin knocks out one of his own refs, Nick Patrick, I believe it was. So when both refs are down, Kurt Angle gets back in there, and by God, he hits Stone Cold with the title belt, turning once again on the Alliance and allows Rock to hit the rock bottom onto Stone Cold for the win. WWF wins. The Alliance is dead. A lot of shenanigans in this match, but ultimately, like, there's a lot of stories embedded in it, and I thought they did a good job at kind of creating a not just one elimination after the other. They kind of had different stories throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the match. It was better than anything I've seen in the past couple of years from the WWE. I mean, you know, a lot of great names there. It was fun to watch, and I think everybody did everything, you know, great. You know, it was really well done. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Even though, you know, I don't think anybody in that arena thought the WWF was losing this match. But for what it was, very entertaining. You know, Vince McMahon comes out, does the whole, you know, hands in the air thing. It's good shit. It was good. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, that's how the show comes to a close, and that's how the invasion comes to a close. So, yeah, you watched the show. I mean, ultimately, say if you had to give it a rating out of 10, what do you think you'd give it?
I would give it, just for the main event alone, I would give it an 8.
Yeah.
It was better. It was better than what I would have remembered. But being that this could have been probably the greatest angle of all time, it should have, you know, with the undercard and stuff. But the main event, I mean, they did do a good job. So it was a lot better than I remembered it, you know, from way back when.
Yeah,
definitely.
Definitely a lot of things they could have done differently in the build up, but
sure,
for what they had, the players that play, couldn't have been any better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, man, that's pretty much all I got. Yeah, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch the show.
It was a pleasure, man. I wanted to be able, anytime I do these things, I like to be prepared, because, you know, I'm here. I want to give some real insight. I mean, you know, right. So yeah, it was a pleasure, man. I had a good time. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've heard you on a bunch of interviews over the years. You're such a great talker and such a young, like you said, great to have insight on somebody who was actually on the show, even though you don't remember.
Right. I know, right?
But yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Do you have anything you want to plug or anything?
Just follow me on Twitter and Instagram, both at PJ Polacco, and of course, ProWrestlingTees.com/Just-Incredible. And that's it.
Absolutely, man. Once again, thank you for coming on here.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, man.
Once again, thank you so much to Just Incredible for joining me on this episode reviewing Survivor Series 2001, a show that he was involved in, even though he didn't remember. I mean, there was so much other stuff I wanted to ask him, but I was just so excited to have him on that I meant to ask him if I could be the 4th member of X Factor. It was a whole thing. But really awesome guest. Such a good talker, man. Anybody that's seen him in ECW knows that he is such a great orator in so many different ways. So thank you to him. Such a fun time. And yeah, guys, if you haven't listened to my previous Invasion era pay-per-view reviews, I highly recommend it. Just go to apronbump.com, and up at the top, you'll see an episodes tab. Click on that and go to Attitude Era, and that'll just display you all of these reviews. You can click on your podcast platform of choice or YouTube, whatever you fancy. And I'm saying this because it's funny. You can literally hear my tone evolve over time. You know, Invasion, I was very glass half full. Then SummerSlam happened. I lost some of the glass. Then Unforgiven, No Mercy, and now we're here. And now I've pretty much smashed that glass on the counter and it shoved the shards up my asshole. That's pretty much where we're at now. But yeah, that's the Invasion, folks. And now we move on to I guess it wouldn't be Ruthless Aggression right away, right? What is that period? What is the period called between the Invasion and Ruthless Aggression? Because Ruthless Aggression doesn't really start until the brand split, really, right? Was it spring of 2002? What is that little period in between? Is that the Lost era? The NWO era? What is it? The Triple H comes back and is all sweaty and jacked era? It's something like that, right? But look forward to getting into that soon. It might be a little bit before my Vengeance review because of the whole Peacock deal. All the Raws and SmackDowns haven't transferred over completely, so it might be a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. But yeah, that's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you once again to Just Incredible. Apronbump.com. We'll link you to all my social media and all the platforms that you can enjoy this luscious, luscious voice in your ear holes. That's all I got. Thank you guys once again for listening. I'm hard.
Talk around and disregard it. Strip you you off the ground, show you what heart is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started. It's the hardest. Talk around, don't disregard it. Sweep you off the ground, show you.